You know, I put here misleading headline alert because I read there was a headline saying most trans children just going through a phase, advises NHS. Now, I say misleading headline, it happens all too often because when one actually reads the piece, I think this was in the Times, it's actually about new coming up NHS draft guidelines. And when you read carefully, this is why you should never just go on the headline of a newspaper. Many people do, and you see in the comment section, it's like, oh, knee jerk. But NHS draft guidelines say that doctors should carefully explore all underlying health problems when it comes, this is about children, transgender children, including mental ill health, amid concerns that the NHS is maybe rushing children to irreversible puberty blocking medication. Now, I want you to hear this out because it's beyond the headline. So before we knee jerk, the NHS England document states the clinical management approach should be open to exploring all developmentally appropriate options for children and young people who are experiencing gender incongruence, being mindful that this may be a transient phase, particularly for prepubertal children, and that there will be a range of pathways to support these children and young people and a range of outcomes. A significant portion of children and young people who are concerned about or distressed by issues of gender incongruence experience coexisting mental health, neurodevelopmental, I should be able to say that, and or family or social complexities in their life. So it's about looking at absolute everything. It's not just dismissing children, trans children. It's about seeing, I guess, the bigger picture. I just wanted to talk about this with my next guest, who is a co-founder of the grassroots activism team, Trans Activism UK, and Felix Fern, who joins me now. Felix, thank you so much for your time. Is that wise advice, do you think, or unnecessary? What are your feelings about that?
I mean, I think that you hit the nail on the head initially by the fact that, unfortunately, the mainstream media have not so much misinterpreted, but in bad faith given an incorrect interpretation of the NHS guidelines. I think the guidelines aren't perfect. However, the main takeaway is exactly what you've read out. It's not saying that trans children are all going through a phase, which the media has randomly thrown out there to get everyone frightened about the big scary trans agenda, but rather that they are children. There is always a chance that it could be a transient phase. They may not be going through a normal sort of cookie cutter transition, and that's fine and it's normal. It's not anything scary, and all children should be supported to work that out for themselves with the help of both a supportive family and professionals.
I mentioned this before, and I don't want to go into who they are, but there's trans, so it's a big issue. There's trans and transgender, but let's talk about just the whole. We're talking about the whole area. You can be trans without wanting to be transgender. There's a whole debate, and I don't think the vast majority of people know diddly squat about the difference. Or if you have a deeply distressed child, and we have to look at the suicide figures, for children who are deeply distressed for whatever reasons around incongruence and sexuality. And I read there's somebody called Pinkman Ray, who I follow on social media, who made the really pertinent point that, yes, sometimes if children transition or people transition, they may transition back. It's a much smaller number. However, there are more suicides amongst children who are just left to wallow than there's virtually no suicides about people who change back.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, looking at statistics, we know that the chances of detransition are incredibly slim. Not only are they incredibly slim, but they're normally due to a lack of support. The chances of it happening due to regret are normally so if, say, you have 1% of transitioners, the amount of those doing it, like detransitioning rather due to regret, is halved. Most people are doing it for financial reasons or because they feel pressured by their family, their friends, the people around them. So they're far more likely to end up with worse mental health. And the same goes for children. There was a very recent study in the Netherlands of 720 under 18s. And of all of those, less than 2% have expressed a desire to stop being on hormone blockers. And then when you look at adults, the statistics are incredibly similar. I think for the US, it's something like 8% of people may consider detransition, or they consider not being happy, but they may not actually detransition. The vast majority of people are happier when they're being given support. That's not only professional, but also amongst their families as well. Like, looking at transgender children at the moment and the trans community as a whole, something that is far scarier and more worrying for people is not whether or not they may go through transition or what elements of transition will make them happy. It's headlines like this in the mainstream media that tell them that there's this big terrifying agenda that's going to make their lives more difficult, or that doctors aren't necessarily acting in good faith. And that's going to weigh on people's minds far more than the actual reality of being trans.
And I've touched upon having a trans kid, so you know, and when you have a loved one going through anything like this, you want as much support. Here's a question. Let me just throw it out there, because loads of people are going to saying it. Why do you think it's so, you know, the people who say, oh, it wasn't like that in my day, all of this trans, this, that, and the other, it's just a fashion. Why are so many people wanting to be transgender now? Why do you think that it's just more visible thanks to social media and what have you? Or do you think that the more we talk about it, the more it comes to be the norm?
I think that despite scary headlines like this, it is 100% a sign that no matter how bad things may look in the mainstream media, things are actually getting better. We didn't see as many gay people. We didn't see as many bisexual people. It's all the people suggesting that it is a phase or that people are suddenly appearing in huge numbers is just mindless rehashed homophobia and fear-mongering. We've always been here, and seeing more of us is meant to be a good sign. It's not a scary sign that we're suddenly all taking over with this big scary conspiracy. It's a wonderful sign that the world is becoming safer for us to be here and for people to actually see us instead of us hiding away in the shadows.
When you look at the history, I didn't realize, and I've learned through my kid, how many famous people going back centuries would have been labeled trans or transgender. I mean, really, loads and loads of people don't even know about. It's another part of history that we don't learn about, and it's because it's invisible, we think it didn't exist.
Yeah, absolutely. We didn't have the same kind of terminology. So it's so often you'll be reading about, especially like literary famous people, the amount of times you will look into it and suddenly see this woman lived as a man throughout her life and decided to marry a woman, and she dressed as a man and she lived as a man. It's like, that's a trans person. They've always been there. They just didn't have the same kind of terminology or support that we have now. We've been around this whole time. I was literally writing an article about the intersection between queerness and horror recently, because Halloween, and reading about how Mary Shelley, who we now know was bisexual, had a transgender male friend, and just all this stuff has just been kind of hidden away in history. We've always been here. It's just nice now that we can be recognized for who we are.
And it's nice now. My personal thoughts are that they're bringing mental health services and the whole not dealing with anybody. I don't think it's just a trans or a transgender issue. I think anybody with any issue, you need a 360-degree look at what's going on in their life. It's treating the person rather than the quote unquote condition.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, from my point of view, I am transgender. I also have depression and I also have autism. And sometimes those things can intersect. I know personally for me that they're not compatible with one another. But if you are looking at an individual and they're struggling in one area, you should look at everything, because some things may be headbutting with something else. We should focus far less on identity politics and just ensuring that people are getting the right kind of treatment that they should be getting, regardless of who they are. Because you're absolutely right. Mental health is a far bigger crisis at the moment than being trans.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much, Felix Fern. Really nice talking to you and
No worries.
debunking
Thank you so much.
some of the headlines and looking beyond that.